and welcome back to our channel after what has been quite a long break. It's really nice to be back here with you. I hope that you've all been having a lovely summer holiday. Today in this video, I really wanted to share with you 10 mistakes that you do not want to make in your interior design project. The tips that I'm sharing with you in this video are all taken from our online course, the Sophie Paterson Academy, but I really wanted to share with you some free tips that are going to really help save you from some very expensive mistakes. So number one is do not skip the briefing process. And I think this is a mistake that a lot of people make when they're designing for their own home. You know, I'm renovating or I'm planning a renovation for my own home very soon, and I nearly fell down this same trap. But the reason why it's so important is that it's not just about what your project looks like, but how it functions for you and all the people that live in that property. We have a really extensive questionnaire that we run through with all of our clients, and it covers everything from who's going to be using the space, how do they want to use it, even down to their daily routine. You know, what time do they wake up? Where do they like to have their breakfast? How do they like to eat their breakfast? Are they messy? Who uses the bathroom first? And to put this into context of how important it is, we did a project last year where we obviously went through our briefing process, and by understanding our client's routine, one of the couple woke up 2 hours before the other couple, and it was actually causing problems in their relationship. We were able to design away that issue. So when the partner that had to get to work really early woke up, we would have motion activated lights at low level by his bedside table that guided him towards the bathroom without having to turn the overhead lights on. And let me tell you, this was life-changing for that couple. So it just shows you how important the brief process is. In our online course, I share all of our questionnaires that we use. But if you're making your own questionnaire, I would say just think about everything that you're going to use in that room. How do you want to use it? How important is practicality? It's not just about aesthetics, but you should also think about what colors does your client or you like, patterns. And when I'm looking at colors and patterns, I don't just rely on descriptions of those colors, because what I found historically has happened is clients might say no to colors like red, yellow, orange or green. But if you show them examples, like here for example, I mean this is a marble, but imagine this was a fabric. I show them this as a red. They might love this dark burgundy red, but when I asked them the question, they were thinking of bright traffic light red. So it just shows how important illustrating these things to your client are. But the more detailed you can be, the better. And if you forget to ask questions, you can always go back and ask them more. Number two, get a wide source of inspiration for your mood board. So often I'll see replicas of our work or other designers' work where people have taken the image from Instagram and tried to replicate it in a completely different room. And the reason why this doesn't work is that scheme has been designed for that particular room, its proportions, its light conditions. And if you try and replicate that in a different room, it's always going to lack something and you're always going to be disappointed. It's far better to come up with your own original designs. And that's not to say you can't take inspiration from our portfolio or other people's portfolios, but you should be looking at specific design elements that you want to bring into your design and combine with other features. When I'm looking at inspiration, I often use Pinterest, but I will pin not just images of, you know, interiors, but I'll be looking at, you know, particular fabrics or perhaps images of nature. One of our projects that we designed in Amman, we took inspiration from the view outside onto the beach and the sunset, and that was able to create a really original, authentic colour scheme that worked for that room because it worked with the light conditions. And you want to be looking at things like architecture, fashion, fabrics. There is no right or wrong way to get inspiration. You can start with anything. You could start with a piece of art, a fabric, a piece of furniture, and then build your scheme around that. This is the way that you're going to find a much more enduring design. People often ask me, how are our designs so timeless? It's because we're not just replicating what we've seen elsewhere and trying to force it into a room. We're really thinking about the setting, the architecture, the views, the light conditions, and what you're getting in that room works with all of those factors. Number three, don't buy any furniture without having first done your floor plan. The reason why this is so important is because your floor plan, if you do it to scale, and you don't have to do it on AutoCAD or SketchUp, you can do it by hand using a scale ruler and a pencil and some graph paper, but that is going to show you exactly the proportions that you want for your piece of furniture. If you're just buying based on what you think looks lovely, you see it in a shop, perhaps they've got a sale on, and then you're trying to force it into the room later, you're always going to have issues or disappointment. When we're looking at the floor plan, we always try and put furniture so that it's equally spaced around the room. Particularly in a living room, I often see living rooms that are designed with furniture on just one side, or seating rather, on just one or two sides. Whereas I always like to put seating on at least three sides because it makes it much more sociable. Another thing that you want to be thinking about is the proportion of the seating. So rather than having lots of small seats, it's better to have one really well, generously sized sofa, and then maybe just like some upholstered cubes, because people, when they're using the room, are always going to want to have that one piece of comfortable furniture. Another thing that you can really learn from your floor plan is the size of the rug. With the rug, you always want to have the biggest rug you can possibly have. This will make your room look bigger and allow for your front feet of your armchairs and sofas to be on that rug. Number 4, fabric schemes. Mistakes that I often see with fabric schemes is that the accent colour that you take isn't balanced around the whole room. So again, you want to refer back to your floor plan. When I'm looking at a floor plan, I'm thinking about what piece of furniture is going where and where is the colour coming from. So for example, if you had a sitting room and you took your inspiration from a painting on the wall and then you had a sofa underneath that, naturally you'd want to bring the colours and the patterns from that painting down onto the cushions of the sofa. But then you've also got to think about what is opposite that sofa. Perhaps it's a sideboard or some armchairs. You want to make sure that that accent colour is then brought onto that side of the room. It shouldn't all be focused on just one side. And then ways that you want to bring that colour in. Perhaps don't just look at accessories and cushions. That's a very sort of entry-level way to bring your colour in. Also think about the shades on your lamps, perhaps your table lamps. And if you really want to commit to a colour scheme, we often like to use the accent colour on some small pieces of upholstery, not necessarily the large sofa, but perhaps a small armchair or a bench, or you could have it as a trim going down your curtains. That's going to feel much more cohesive and balanced. If you're doing a neutral colour scheme, the main thing that you want to avoid, and this is a really, again, a common mistake that I see, is people will pick an accent colour, say for example taupe, and they'll go all for the same tone of shade of taupe. So generally it's a mid-tone, and what's going to happen is your scheme is going to feel really flat and uninteresting. If you wanted to go for an interesting scheme involving taupe, what you want to do is go all the way from like these dark bronze colours, or something like this, like an antique brass, and then you can go down to your sort of neutral taupes and all the way through to creams. That's going to make it feel a lot more interesting, because the key to a neutral scheme that's interesting is contrast. You also want to be very aware of the different textures that you're using. So we will never mix too many of the same texture of fabric. If you had a sofa or a headboard that had a linen fabric, for the cushions that I combine with that, I'll make sure they've got a completely different texture, whether that's velvet or boucle or something with embroidery. That tactile difference is what makes it feel interesting. The light will hit it in different ways and it will feel much more rich and layered. Number 5 is lighting. Now, lighting can make or break your interior, and the mistakes that I think are the biggest mistakes that I often see is that people treat their lighting scheme like a grid layout, and I feel like the days of having straight lines of spotlights in your ceiling are done. There is absolutely no excuse for it. The reason why this doesn't work is the light is hitting just pools of empty floor, and what you want to think about when it comes to your lighting is not how neat it looks on your ceiling, but what it's actually hitting on in the room, whether that's on your wall elevations or your pieces of furniture. We never design the lighting scheme until we understand exactly what our floor plan layout is, where the furniture is going, and even where our art is and how big that art is. And the reason for that is because it dictates the type of fitting, the beam width that you choose, whether it's an angle downlight or a fixed spotlight. You really want to be bearing in mind everything. So the lighting design actually surprisingly comes much later on. I could do a whole video on this, and we have a lot of detail in our online course, but a few tips that I'd like to give you is, if, for example, you have a living room or a dining room and you want to have light in the middle of the room, I think the reason why people overcompensate and put too many fittings is they're worried it's going to be dark, but all that does is it makes the whole room feel flat. Instead, you want to be very selective. So you could have a spotlight in the middle of your room, but it should be directly above either your coffee table or your dining table. Don't just have it hitting random points on the flooring because it will look very, very flat. Also, around your perimeter of the wall, you want to position your wall lights. Ideally have directional wall lights and have them 50 centimeters from the wall. And when that's an angled spotlight, that's going to give you a beautiful wash down your wall covering or your piece of art. And then if you have things like sculptures or plinths, you want to have a very narrow beam directly above that plinth, and it's going to make your art feel so much more special. The colour of your light's also really important. And again, this is something that I hear of contractors sort of pushing my clients or us towards certain colours, but we're very adamant that we like to stick with 2700 Kelvin. And that is like a natural sort of warm white that will make the room feel very cozy and inviting, but doesn't distort the colours of the fabrics and the finishes too much. We've had situations in projects in the Middle East where the contractor was adamant that we should go for a brighter, cooler light to counteract all the sunshine coming in. And we actually got two different light fittings, one which was 2700 Kelvin and one which was much brighter, and showed it to the client. And immediately they were drawn to the 2700 because it gives that much more warm, cozy feeling rather than something that feels very cool and it gives a very cold atmosphere in your interior. So think about not just positions, the types of light fitting, the beam widths, the colour. And if you'd like more information about this, definitely check out our online course because we share lots of comprehensive information and drawings and diagrams on everything that you should be aware of. Number 6, check your paint colours, your fabrics and your finishes on site if possible. Don't just rely on the lighting in the room that you're designing in. So right now we're in our studio and we actually have 2700 Kelvin, which is consistent with what we'll have in our projects. But the light here is completely different to the light in the Middle East or in London. It depends on how many windows you've got with the orientation. So what I do is I'll design all the schemes here, and then myself and the team will actually take these boards outside to see what they look like in natural light. And what you'll find is something that felt like a really cohesive scheme in certain light conditions will feel completely different. You know, the colours might change. What felt very sort of tied together and considered could suddenly have really clashing colours. So it's really important, check your fabrics and your finishes either on site, different light conditions, or certainly under artificial light and natural light too. Number 7, joinery, or some people refer to as carpentry. Now this is one of the most expensive things you can do in your project, but it is so important, particularly if you're designing a small property, as it's going to give you the most efficient storage. Common mistakes that I see, particularly in bedrooms, and apologies if you can hear that dog barking, that is Pip downstairs being very annoying. In bedrooms, I'll find people often feel quite limited to the materials that they want to use. So even though you might have a whole bank of wardrobes down one wall, they will pick one wood and do that material across the whole wardrobe. Or they might pick a white lacquer and it will feel completely disconnected from what's going on in the rest of the room. Or if you go for a lot of wood, it might feel very dark and oppressive or overly dominating for the space. What we tend to do is go for a frame either in wood or metal, and then we'll do an insert of a different material, whether that's mirror or a wall covering or a fabric, and that will really soften up the scheme and make it feel much more luxurious. When it comes to designing your joinery, also refer back to your floor plan and think about the door swing of the doors, whether it's a wardrobe or a media unit, because you don't want to think about what it's like when the doors are all shut, but will there be any clashes when they open? Some really common areas where you'll see this is if someone's designing a run of wardrobes next to a window, they won't think about allowing space for a stack of curtains, which should be at least 25 centimeters in front of the window. So you should have a piece of wood before you start your door that will allow the depth of the curtains that you need so they don't get squashed every time you open them. And another area that I see a lot is in small bedrooms. Again, if you've got the wardrobes going all the way next to the bed, then they won't think about the fact that the last wardrobe door next to the bedside table will often clash. So what we'll do there is either do open shelves, so you can access everything, maybe with some wicker baskets, or we will have that door locked in place and you can access that final bit of storage from the door next to it. Number 8, furniture. Now, mistakes that I often see happen with furniture is that people, if they're designing a small room, will think that it's better to go small on the furniture, but actually the opposite is true. Small furniture, small sofas, small beds, small rugs will all visually shrink the room. It's better to prioritize the most important pieces of furniture and go for the right scale. So in a bedroom, we'll always prioritize a really good sized bed and maybe go smaller on the bedside tables. And in a living room, we'll prioritize the main sofa and then supplement that with some smaller furniture elsewhere. The other thing that I see, and is a pet hate of mine, is matching suites of furniture, whether that's a matching sofa and armchair suite, or bedrooms or dining rooms where the bedside tables, the chest of drawers, and any tables or chairs are all matching, all in exactly the same wood finish. It really lacks character and soul. What you want to do instead is layer in different styles, different eras, different materials. That's going to give you that much more layered and timeless feel. You don't have to match everything perfectly, but you should be aware of the different finishes. So for example, if you had a mahogany chest of drawers, that wouldn't necessarily combine with something that's got very sort of cool grey undertones. It's better to have tones of wood and materials that all combine well together, that aren't necessarily exactly the same colour, but have similar background tones. Number 9, flooring. Now, I always say to all my clients and my team, the hard finishes are what you really want to invest in, because anything that is hard to change later should be quality, should endure and be timeless. So when it comes to your flooring, really refer back to your brief and understand how important is practicality, what kind of lifestyle does the homeowner have, are they prepared to do maintenance? That will rule out certain materials. So for example, if a client loves the look of marble but doesn't want to have their natural marble repolished every couple of years, then I will guide them more towards man-made products, perhaps a porcelain that mimics stone or mimics wooden floor. If your client wants to go for natural materials, say for example they want to have a timber floor, then one of my top tips is to, if it's in an entrance hall, is always include an integrated doormat. Normally we will have them made from coir matting, and ideally you want to have them at least the depth of 2 footprints so that you're not just sort of going past it and going straight onto the flooring. The beauty of coir matting is it's going to hold on to any kind of grit or stones that you're bringing in from the outside, and it will prevent your floor from getting scratched long term. For timber flooring, another couple of top tips that I want to squeeze in here, we can't cover everything, is that I find brushed texture on your flooring much more practical. So when it's brushed, is that it's literally had a brush go over it and it sort of removes the soft element of the wood, and it makes it have a much more sort of heavily textured finish. Firstly, it's less slippery, but secondly, I find it's less prone to scratching than something that's completely smooth or highly polished. And then the last thing that I always say to my clients is, if you go for a natural wood, say for example it's oak, you're more likely to notice scratches if it's been stained very, very dark. Whereas if you stick to the natural colour of that, you know, even this is oak, this has had a stain, but it's not 100% different from what's underneath. You know, it's slightly more muted, it's slightly lighter, it's taken the yellow out. But if this was to get scratched, you wouldn't notice it as much as if it was a really dark stain and there was a scratch and it showed the natural oak underneath. So try and stick closely to the colours of that natural material. Another question that I'm often asked by my followers on Instagram is, should you match the colour of your timber floor to your joinery? And the truth is no, because you don't want to have everything matching, but again, it should tone well. If I'm doing timber flooring in a kitchen and I've also got timber doors, I will make sure that there's a clear contrast between them, either through colour or the layout of the flooring or even the grain. So if I go for a very sort of linear quarter cut grain on the carpentry, I might go for a more open grain on the floor. You want to have a clear differentiation so it doesn't feel like you're living in a box. Number 10, and it's not the most exciting thing, but it's probably the most single important mistake that you could make on your project, is not getting your communication and your documentation right. As a designer, you have a huge amount of liability, and it's really important that you carefully document everything that you communicate with your client, your suppliers, and your contractors. For us, when it comes to communication with a client, often we'll be communicating with them on WhatsApp or phone calls. Always have a clear line of communication, so you follow that up with emails, we'll send file notes. And then when it comes to your contractors, The level of detail we go to always shocks our clients, but it's so important. So things that we include are a schedule of finishes. This is a document that outlines all of the hard finishes that we're using, from the flooring to the wall finishes. A scope of works. This clearly lists out everything that the contractor needs to do in every single room and has specifications of the products we're using, the finishes, the suppliers that we want them to get them from. And a program of work, so we'll always work with the contractor to put together a program, and this outlines how long each stage of the project will take. And then lastly, your drawings. Your drawings can save you from so many expensive variations down the line. The more information you can put on there, the better. In our course, I actually share all of our real life documentation that we use, all of the documents that I've explained, because I know how important it is to get this right. If you're wanting to do it yourself, my main piece of advice is just make sure that you cover all of the details and have someone else double check it, because it's really hard to see your own mistakes. When we're doing a project, we have multiple team members check every single thing that we use on the project, all the documents, all the drawings we issue. And to show you how important this is, on projects of ours, it has saved our clients thousands upon thousands of pounds by the fact that we are so detailed. So when we'll send the contractor all of the documentation, we ensure that everything is written on the drawings as well as the scope of works. And the fact that it's listed and mentioned on those drawings has saved our clients from really expensive variations down the line, because we're able to illustrate to the contractor, this was always in the scope of works, this was always in the drawings, and it should have been allowed for. Now, before I go, I want to do a really exciting unboxing. This is the latest product that we've just launched with Addison Ross. It's a salt and pepper grinder. We've been working on it for years, and I can't wait to share it with you. So I'll do a quick unboxing now. We've done it in 4 different colorways, and honestly, if I showed you all the different prototypes, all the different drawings that we went through to land on the perfect design, you would be shocked. But for me, it's so important to get it right, not just the proportions, but how it feels as well, because this is a product you're going to touch and feel a lot. And I wanted to make sure it was really practical. It wasn't going to mark too much, so we didn't make it too high gloss that would show any oily fingerprints if you've been using olive oil. It's made from solid wood, so you can see all the natural wood underneath. And then it's got this lovely textured finish with some antique brass detailing on the band here and a little bit on the top. Now, we've done it in 4 colours that can all mix and match really nicely. We've got white, this beautiful grey colour as well. It's quite a warm grey. That one's one of my favourites. I'm going to save this for last, actually. I did quite a colourful one. We've also done it in taupe, which is a beautiful sandy taupe colour. Now, I think these two combine really nicely, and I'm going to use these in my own kitchen. So I'm going to have this one for salt and a slightly darker one for pepper. But because I'm greedy and I want them all, I also want to have this beautiful blue one, which I think is so perfect for summer. And I'm going to combine that with the white, and that will work really nicely with my blue and white crockery that I often use in the summer. So they are available from Addison Ross now, and I'll share the link in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been really nice to catch up with you. And if you haven't hit subscribe, make sure you do, because our next video is a very exciting one. A long-awaited project reveal that hasn't been seen anywhere else. You'll be the first to see it on YouTube. So hit subscribe, and some exciting content coming your way.